Hey y'all, and welcome back to another episode of There's Danger Here. I'm Leilani, and today we're going to go back to talking about a prison. Before we get into the event in question, however, first, we should talk about the location. The Attica Correctional Facility was built in the 1930s in Attica, New York, built in response to riots that were plaguing the area. Constructed with 2 feet thick and 30 feet high walls that were topped with about a dozen guard towers. The facility was meant to hold a maximum number of 1,600 inmates. However, inmates spent over half of the day in their cells, averaging 14 hours, and honestly, I think that aside from those with jobs, that's still a fairly standard number for that level of a prison, at least out here. Well, I just said that the prison was meant to only hold 1,600. By the 60s, the prison contained over 2,000 men, and in 1971, that number spiked to 2,250. At that time, each man was given a single roll of toilet paper a month to use and received 1 shower per week. Needless to say, conditions were bleak. Then, the population was approximately 2/3 Hispanic or African American, and the vast majority were poor from the New York cities, while the officers were mainly white men from rural New York. Authorities within the system banned political organizations and forbade Muslims from holding religious services. Inmates were angry at the conditions they were forced to live in, and in the summer of 1971 staged multiple peaceful protests. They even voiced their complaints to Russell Oswald, the Commissioner of Correctional Services, when he visited the prison in early September. All reports stated that he was called away before enacting any changes, and I'm not sure what that meant or why he couldn't have, done it from afar. But in either case, on September 8th, a correctional officer attempted to discipline 2 inmates that were engaging in horseplay, mistaking it for fighting. When 2 officers attempted to break it up, the inmates engaged and were subsequently sent to disciplinary confinement. Resentment spread through the prison like wildfire at the treatment of the inmates that were sent to confinement. On the 9th, a riot broke out. It started in cell block 5 when the inmates were brought out for breakfast. Inmates were learning of what happened on the 8th, and 5 of them returned to their cells in solidarity of those in confinement. One of the 2 officers from the day before ended up asking the group to sell in after realizing their count was off because of those 5. The inmates began to complain, then yell, and then their words turned into action. At that time, inmates took control of cell block 5, set fires that destroyed the chapel and garage, and they also took control of 4 other cell blocks. And they took more than 40 workers within the prison hostage. So we're not just talking the officers, but also civilians that worked within it. One correctional officer was beaten in the head, sustaining a life-ending injury. And throughout the next few days, 3 more inmates were killed by their own. Approximately 1,300 inmates congregated in D Yard, where they also brought 38 of the hostages. The inmates organized quickly, and when negotiations began, the Muslim inmates ensured the hostages were protected by acting as their security. While an assigned committee was selected to handle the contact with the prison administration for the negotiations, the committee produced a statement that listed their grievances as well as what their demands were. According to Britannica, quote, "The first negotiations were carried out directly between Russell Oswald, who was the New York's Commissioner of Corrections, and the inmates. Oswald entered the prison on the afternoon of September 9th. He was accompanied by representatives of the media, giving the outside world its first look inside the prison. However, miscommunications between Oswald and the prisoners quickly caused a breakdown in trust, and the prisoners refused to continue direct talks. On September 10th, an observers committee invited by the prisoners arrived at the prison. It included prominent African American and Hispanic political leaders from New York, activists, lawyers, journalists, and members of the Black Panther Party and the Nation of Islam. That group although originally invited as observers, took the role of intermediaries in the negotiations. Meanwhile, a force of more than 1,000 law enforcement officers, including state troopers, correction officers, and local police, gathered at the prison. Over the next 2 days, the administration and the prisoners exchanged proposals, but by September 12th, Oswald and Nelson Rockefeller, the governor of New York, had concluded that the situation could not be resolved through negotiations. End quote. And just so everybody's aware, the 5 demands at the time that started were: 1. We want complete amnesty, meaning freedom from all and any physical, mental, and legal reprisals. 2. We want now speedy and safe transportation out of confinement to a non-imperialistic country. 3. We demand that the federal government intervene so that we will be under direct federal jurisdiction. 4. We want the governor and judiciary, namely Constance B. Motley, to agree that there will be no reprisals, and we want all factions of the media to articulate this. 5. We urgently demand the immediate negotiations through William M. Kunstler, Attorney at Law, 588 9th Avenue, New York, New York. Assemblyman Arthur O. Eve of Buffalo, the Prisoner Solidarity Committee of New York, Minister Farquhar of the Muslims. We want Huey P. Newton from the Black Panther Party, and we want the chairman of the Young Lords Party. We want Clarence B. Jones of Amsterdam News. And we want Tom Wicker of the New York Times. We want Richard Roth from the Courier Express. We want the Fortune Society. Dave Anderson of the Urban League of Rochester. Brian Eva Barner. We want Jim Henling of the Democratic Late Chronicle of New York, Michigan. We guarantee the safe passage of all people to and from this institution. We invite all the people to come here and witness this degradation so that they can better know how to bring this degradation to an end. This is what we want. That's how it started. Eventually, a manifesto came out with a total of 27 demands, and some of them were as follows. 1. We demand the constitutional rights of legal representation at the time of all parole board hearings and protection from the procedures of the parole authorities whereby they permit no procedural safeguards such as an attorney for cross-examination of witnesses in behalf of the parolee at parole revocation hearings. 2. We demand a change in medical staff and medical policy and procedure. The Attica Prison Hospital is totally inadequate, understaffed, and prejudiced in the treatment of inmates. There are numerous mistakes made many times. Improper and erroneous medication is given by untrained personnel. We also demand periodical checkups on all prisoners and sufficient licensed practitioners 24 hours a day instead of inmates' help that is used now. 3. We demand adequate visiting conditions and facilities for the inmate and families of Attica Prison. The visiting facilities at the prison are such as to preclude adequate visiting for inmates and their families. Some of these also had to do with work. They do demand things like being able to join a union and getting better pay, which even nowadays, I can tell you that the inmates' pay is like pennies on the dollar an hour. S- and then they have starting at number 10, we demand that correctional officers be prosecuted as a matter of law for any act of cruel and unusual punishment where it is not a matter of life and death. 11, we demand that all institutions using inmate labor be made to conform with the state and federal minimum wage laws. So again, we're talking about money, which still is not the standard. 12, we demand an end to escalating practice of physical brutality being perpetrated upon the inmates of New York State prisons. They also demand things like being able to be trained. So, number 16, we demand the establishment of unionized vocational training programs comparable to that of the federal prison system, which provides for union instructions, union pay scales, and union membership upon completion of vocational training courses, which of course would help them in the long run in things like getting jobs when they get out. And then they have some complaints about inherent racism in the system itself. And so Some of them are: we demand an immediate end to the agitation of race relations by prison administration of the state. We demand the Department of Correction to furnish all prisoners with services of ethnic counselors for the need of special services of the brown and black population of this prison. We demand an end to the discrimination in the judgment and quota of parole for black and brown people. And then the final three demands that they brought out were basic quality of life and care within prison. So 25, we demand that better food be served to the inmates. The food is a gastronomical disaster. We also demand that drinking water be put on each table and that each inmate be allowed to take as much food as he wants and as much bread as he wants, instead of severely limited portions and limited 4 slices of bread. Inmates wishing pork-free diet should have one, since 85% of our diet is pork, meat, or pork-saturated food. 26. We demand an end to unsanitary conditions that exist in the mess hall, i.e., dirty trays, dirty utensils, stained drinking cups, and an end to the practice of putting food on the tables hours before eating time without any protective covering over it. 27. We demand that there be a set of rules governing all prisons in this state instead of the present system where each warden makes rules for his institution as he sees fit. So, in their conclusion, the prisoners insisted that they're firm in their resolve and their demands as human beings the dignity and justice that is due by their right of birth. So during the 4 days, Oswald agreed to many of these demands, but refused to grant complete amnesty that was requested. He also warned of an assault if the hostages weren't released. When that didn't happen, Oswald and the governor, Nelson Rockefeller, ordered state troopers to retake the facility by force. On September 13th, the final ultimatum was read to the inmates by Oswald. Their response was to take 8 blindfolded hostages to catwalks and hold knives to their throats and bodies as a sign of rejection. 15 minutes after that, a helicopter dropped tear gas into the yard, and the prison was stormed by police and correction officers. Their lack of disregard for aim or people resulted in the shooting deaths of 29 inmates and 10 of the hostages. Another 90 were wounded. So let me make it clear. Their response killed the hostages. And while rumors circulated that several were the result of an inmate direct action against them, autopsies confirmed all died as a result of bullet wounds. A misstep considered by many is the fact that, if you're paying attention, I said Oswald went out. Governor Rockefeller never went out to meet the inmates and attempt anything resembling a face-to-face negotiation. He didn't see their conditions. Nothing. In under 60 minutes, Attica was retaken, and the inmates were searched and transported back to their cells. As they were brought to their cells, many of them were beaten by the response team. Again, I just talked about how they killed hostages, so why would they care about, the welfare of people that they're trying to put back into cells? Press covered the entire uprising, which made people across the country aware of the conditions the inmates were living in. According to the McKay Commission that reported on the events officially, they stated, quote, with the exception of Indian massacres in the late 19th century, the state police assault, which ended the 4-day prison uprising, was the bloodiest one-day encounter between Americans since the Civil War, end quote. In the following year, 62 inmates were indicted for more than 1,200 criminal acts, and 1 state trooper was charged with any crime. Again, according to Britannica, quote, an investigation commission led by Robert McKay, the dean of New York University's law school, held hearings regarding the Attica revolt in April of 1972. The commissioner's final report described in great detail the conditions that had led to the revolt and was strongly critical of the authorities' handling of the crisis. It specifically rebuked Rockefeller for not personally visiting the prison before ordering its retaking. In 1974, Governor Hugh Carey sought to bring the matter to a close by pardoning 7 inmates and commuting the sentence of an inmate convicted of killing a correctional officer. In addition, Carey ruled that no disciplinary action should be taken against 19 officers and one civilian whom investigators had suggested should be disciplined. Civil suits by prisoners seeking monetary damages for the use of excessive force continued for years afterward. It was not until 2000 that the state of New York settled a civil suit brought by inmates for $12 million. End quote. And with that, that is the end of the Attica Prison Riot. To all those out there listening, be careful. It's a dangerous world we live in.